Hi, welcome back to another video. Today is the 31st of July, so I decided to film the monthly book roundup. Now, I didn't film it in June because there was a lot of stuff going on and I actually didn't get that much reading done in June. So I thought I would mash up both months to, still keep you updated and stuff. Let's get into it. The first book that I read in June was Birds Without Wings by Louis de Bernières. I didn't really know much about it. I just read the blurb a little bit, but I didn't do much research about it. But the writing style was really lovely. It was very funny in certain parts. Some other parts were really beautiful and really moving, and other parts were a little bit sad. And this book sort of takes you along the journey of the Ottoman Empire and how Turkey became Turkey. But it is also, it's about people, it's about neighbors, it's about religions coexisting and in peace, and how people's aspirations and politicians and things like that came in and had such an impact on these people's lives, to the point of turning people who always coexisted peacefully against each other. And I thought it was beautifully written. It was thought-provoking, and I really, really enjoyed it, so I really recommend it. The next book that I read was called For One More Day by Mitch Albom. This is the story, it's supposed to be a true story, and it is the story of a man who tries to commit suicide, and he gets one more day to spend with his dead mother. It's the story of what they do and all the questions that he gets to ask her, and it goes back and forth through his childhood, through what led him to commit suicide. It just talks about how people get to where they are, and what things that happen to us as children and that we interpret in a certain way when we are children, and then how those things, what those things were in our parents' view, or when you're an adult and you can look back, you can sort of see that certain assumptions that you made were wrong. It was a really beautiful read. It was quite moving. I finished it pretty quickly. It was not very long, but also very gripping. I found that it was relatable to some extent, because obviously our childhood is something that is really important to us, and that really marks us, and that really makes us who we are. The next book is The Time Traveler's Wife by Audrey Niffenegger. So this took me a little bit longer to read. I was a little bit wary at first that I would get very confused with all the backwards and forwards that naturally comes with books that talk about time travel. I was pleasantly surprised that it was not confusing at all. It was very cleverly written. The author gives you details that you think throughout the book that don't seem very relevant, but that in the end, or in the future, they turn out to have some importance. And I thought that was very good. I like when they sort of set the scene properly. That's very interesting. I thought the characters weren't very lovable. They weren't, incredibly relatable, and I just thought that it's very much fiction, because it seemed the whole premise is a little bit far-fetched for me, but I still enjoyed the story, and I still liked the book. It's not my favorite book ever. I thought it was worth reading because of all of the buzz that was around it, and that it's a pretty, because it's a very well-known title, I thought I wanted to read it. The characters, I didn't love them. I thought they were a little bit cold. It's kind of hard to explain. They just weren't very relatable or warm or, lovable. It was pleasant enough. I enjoyed the story while I was reading it. And of course, there were more than one parts where I cried. So I did enjoy it. I wouldn't read it again, and I'm not, I encourage you to read it if you like this kind of thing, but if you don't, I don't think you're really missing out. So the book I read after that was The Girl with a Dragon Tattoo by Steig, Larsson. I went into this book not knowing that much about it, just that it was very famous and that it was a crime, mystery, murder of some sort. And because I am a fan of the detective murder mystery genre, that was enough information for me. I really, really enjoyed this book, and I plan on reading the rest of the series. It was more dark than I expected it to be, or I had it anticipated. I didn't expect it to be dark at all, but obviously there's always some themes that you explore in a crime book that are a little bit on the darker side, but this was like intense in some parts, and I think that's part of the style of this author. I read this fairly quickly because the story is really gripping, and also it's really well written and really well established. The flow of the writing, the flow of the story is really good, and it's written at a good pace, and I feel like, again, there's a lot of clues and a lot of like information that you are given that then at the end is like tied together pretty nicely. And I think that the series is probably still very good. There is some continuity, but it isn't in one of those things that if you haven't read the first one, you won't be able to carry on, I think. I'm not entirely sure because I haven't read the second one yet, but I am planning on it. In crime books, you always get a little bit of a glimpse to the criminal's mind, and you find out what motivates them, what happened to them that, shaped them to be who they are. And I think that the psychology and sociology behind that is very interesting. And in this book particularly, he also adds a lot of psychological history to other characters, which makes them more relatable, gives them more depth and more like realism, and it just makes the book more interesting, because what is a story other than people's lives and how they intertwine. The next book I read was called Orphan of the Sun, and it was by Gill Harvey. Now, I have very mixed emotions about this book. Let me start off by telling you what it's about. It is historical fiction. It is about a girl's life in ancient Egypt, where she gets into some adventures and misadventures, I guess, related to her arranged marriage and all of her family and friends, and the town in general. I was very interested in it because I like historical fiction. I like, this kind of story, and I like books that are set in different eras or different places because I get to learn a little bit about them. At the beginning, I was very into it. I couldn't put it down because the author raised a lot of mysteries and a lot of questions, and there was a lot of dimension to the book or to the story, because she sort of touched on a lot of people's lives and a lot of characters, and you obviously get involved in the characters and you want to know more about them and what happens to them. And up to some point, it was well written, and it was, like I have said before about other books, there were questions being raised, there were certain clues being dropped, so it was, in that sense, it like really builds you up into something. But then I have a quarter of the book left, and I realized that there isn't enough time to answer all the questions that I still have and that are still being raised to this point. The end of the book seems really rushed, and it seemed like a lot of things were left pending, a lot of questions were left unanswered, and the questions that were answered seemed to be sort of like, okay, let's just give this a quick ending just so we can be done with it. And it felt very much like it was rushed, like it wasn't thought out to the end. I don't know. I thought that it felt like the book was supposed to be a series, or like at least there should have been another book afterwards, but it felt like the author sort of decided at the end that she didn't really actually want to do that, so she just sort of wrapped it up a little bit. I really enjoyed the book until I realized that the ending was so not good. The reason why I didn't like the ending is not just because of what happened to the characters wasn't what I hoped would happen. It was also because the author left so many of the other characters' endings out. She raises so many questions about the different people in the town, but then leaves out so much information at the end that you want to know, are they okay, are they not, what happened to them. It left me with a very bitter taste. And then when I went online and researched it a little bit, a lot of people had the same issue where they were really enjoying the book, but then the end was just terrible. If I knew what I know now, I would have avoided it. The next book I read was called Eragon. It's part of the Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini, and there are 4 books in this series. It is a fantasy series. Before I started reading this, I had also read very mixed reviews. It seemed that people either loved it or they hated it. I can't say it was my favorite book, that this is my new favorite series, but I haven't read any more books yet, so I'm not sure. You know, it can still... it still has potential to become a great series. I did enjoy the journey that we were taken on, and I liked the world that was created, although I think that there could be more, that more could be done with it, but again, I will leave that judgment until I read all of the books in the series. This is about a boy who finds a dragon egg and all of the adventures that inevitably come with that, and the journeys that he goes on. It has a lot of mythical creatures and a lot of great and epic traveling, which, if you're into, is also very cool. I was expecting it to be more immersive, like I said, but I definitely do recommend it. The next book that I read was Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Hufflepuff edition. I bought this edition as a collector's item, and I was really pleased that it contained so much extra information. I've talked about this book in another video. I love this book, obviously. I love Harry Potter. I love the world. I love all of it, and I'm just really happy. This is probably my 6th reread of Harry Potter, and my 2nd reread this year, which is intense, I know. The next book that I read was The Edge of Dark by Pamela Hartshorne. The premise of this book is that there is a woman who has a pretty grim past, and she doesn't remember, but she goes back to the town where it all happened as an adult, and starts remembering stuff. But the things that she is remembering aren't hers. They belong to a woman who lived in the place where she is working, and who also had a pretty grim life, but she was alive in the 1500s. The whole book is about both of their memories and both their lives, and how they sort of intertwine. I found it really gripping, and I was really enjoying it. I thought it was a page turner. Read the whole thing in a couple of days, and actually got about 80% of it. I had to stay up all night to read the end because I just couldn't put it down. So I thought that was great. It was different to what I'm used to reading, and I really liked it. The book is well written. It's easy to keep up with. The characters are well developed, and there are a lot of details laid out that help, tie the ending up really nicely. I didn't think the ending was really unpredictable, but it wasn't obvious either. You were taken on a journey, and the ending was plausible, and it was the right amount of drama. It wasn't, too unpredictable, too far-fetched, but it wasn't obvious either, which I really liked. I really enjoyed the book. I recommend it. The next book that I read was called Pig by Andrew Cowan. This was also a very quick read. This is not what I expected it to be. I expected it to be like a great summer romance, and that's not really what it was, even though that's what I was led to believe by the blurb. It was really, really, really descriptive. Like, really descriptive. Sometimes that was a good thing, and sometimes it was kind of annoying and kind of like unnecessary. And it reminded me of The Catcher in the Rye, which, if you saw my last monthly book roundup, I wasn't happy with. I didn't love that book. And it reminds me of The Catcher in the Rye, in the sense that it describes scenes so thoroughly that you assume that they will be important later, and that, the author is leading up to something, but then not a lot happens, and the book ends, and you're just left feeling a little weird, like, okay, is that it? It wasn't as bad as The Catcher in the Rye. In my opinion, it was more gripping than The Catcher in the Rye. It was more interesting. The characters weren't great, though. Some were better than others, obviously, but mostly the characters weren't incredibly relatable or lovable or nice. There wasn't a lot of depth to a lot of the characters. Some more than others. I liked it for the most part. I enjoyed it while I was reading it. I cried at the end. I felt a little bit like this was real, in the sense that it was an accurate portrayal of a summer for a 15-year-old who hasn't got a very interesting life. It doesn't go into much in depth to anything. It wasn't unpleasant to read it. Not like The Catcher in the Rye, where I was annoyed at the book. I probably won't remember this book in a few months. That is all of the books that I read through June and July. I know it was a lot. Thanks for coming on this journey with me. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave it a like and let me know if you've read any of these and what you thought about them. If you would like to, you can consider subscribing to my channel. It'd mean a lot to me. I would be very happy. And I will see you in the next video. Bye!